Hey guys, what's up everyone? Welcome to another episode of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Marenfeld. I'm Brandon Marenfeld. Thank you all for joining me today. This is episode 151 of Hockey on the Spot. And today we're going to continue the NHL's 30 teams in 30 days. And for today, we're going to talk about the Ottawa Senators. And the Ottawa Senators... It really has not been a great summer for them. Let's just put it at that. They were, not too long ago, named one of the worst teams in the offseason this year because of lack of moves made. And we'll get into that in a minute. But first, let's talk about their 2013-14 season as a whole. Going into the season, this was a team that was expected to be one of the best teams in the league. They were going to compete for the top spot in the Eastern Conference. They were going to compete for the Atlantic Division title. They had gotten Bobby Ryan from the Anaheim Ducks, and it made their offense all the better. They got They brought in Clark MacArthur from the Toronto Maple Leafs. So they had lost Daniel Alfredsson, but it looked like they were going in the right direction to fill his void. Jason Spezza became their captain, so it looked like everything was going to be great, and it was going to be a season to remember for the Ottawa Senators. But going into the year, but then once the year began, you could kind of tell right off the bat that there was something wrong in Ottawa. I mean, Bobby Ryan was the best player for them in the beginning of the season. He wasn't disappointing. There was a point where he was leading their team in scoring. I'm pretty sure he finished the season as their. I'm pretty sure he finished the season as their leader in goals. But ultimately, the bottom line was not a good season for the Ottawa Senators. They did not have the same kind of flow that they had in the lockout Jordan year. They were expected to improve on that year. Okay, no, he was not their goals leader. That was Kyle Turris. But Bobby Ryan was one of 5 20-goal scorers on the team. For the Ottawa Senators last season, they had no problem scoring goals. Offensively was not the issue. Erik Karlsson finished as the top scoring defenseman in the NHL and actually set some history last year, becoming the first defenseman since Brian Leetch in 2000-2001 to score both 20 goals and 70-plus points in a season. So it was a great year. It was just a great year for Erik Karlsson offensively. Defensively, though, was a struggle. Jason Spezza, he came back from an injury, coming off his worst season plus-minus wise, minus 26. He was their top scoring forward, though. The one positive that was really taken out of last year was Kyle Turris' development, going better than before, and Clark MacArthur having a great year as well. For Clark MacArthur, it was his career year as far as goals are concerned, and it was his best season plus-minus wise. He was a plus 12. One of the few pluses on a team that did not finish the year with a good plus-minus rating as a whole. Kyle Turris led the team with a plus 22 rating, but anyway, for the Ottawa Senators, it was just not the year that they expected. Offensively, there were no issues. They, again, had 5 different 20-goal scorers this year, and that included defenseman Erik Karlsson. Jason Spezza, he had a 20 on the nose, plus 54 assists. Jason Spezza had 23 goals. Kyle Turris led the team with 26. Clark MacArthur had 24, and Bobby Ryan had 23. So And then one would maybe has to figure that if Mika Zibanejad had played more games, he probably would have had 20 as well. He had 16 through 69 games. He probably would have had 20 had he played those other 13 games. He began the season in the minors. Again, offensively was not the issue for the Senators. The main issue came defensively. This was a team who was victimized of turning over the puck way too much and then not knowing what to do afterwards. And they always coughed it up at the worst times. It was not a good season for them in that aspect. Kind of similar to the Toronto Maple Leafs in the sense that their poor defensive play was what ultimately killed their season in the long run. Not to mention Ottawa was not only one of the worst Ottawa was one of the worst teams as far as penalty minutes were concerned. They were among one of the most penalized teams in the league. They were fourth. They were fourth to last in the league at a 13.3 penalty minute rating. So penalty minutes was a real problem for them. And then also they gave up a lot of goals last year. They were also fourth to last in that aspect to 3.15. So they gave up a lot of goals, and they were a minus team last year as a whole. They gave up more goals than they scored. So though they were a good offensive team, they were a horrible defensive team. So their offense wasn't good enough to cancel out their poor defense, and that not only ultimately cost the Ottawa Senators a playoff spot, but they didn't even have a first-round pick for this upcoming draft. And so the first-round pick they gave to the Anaheim Ducks in the Bobby Ryan trade all of a sudden became the 10th overall pick. And when the Ducks got Ryan Kessler, it wasn't even the 10th overall pick they traded. They traded the 24th overall pick, their own pick. But the Ducks would use that 10th overall pick to select highly touted power forward Nick Ritchie, younger brother of Dallas Stars top prospect Brett Ritchie. But anyway, so kind of a miserable year for the Ottawa Senators, and things are just getting worse from here. Players, for another summer, once again, they are in a situation where top players are asking to leave the Ottawa Senators. They had that situation with Danny Heatley all those years ago. Remember that back in 2009, and it looked like they had a deal done with the Edmonton Oilers. He didn't go there. Ales Hemsky was supposed to be part of that deal. Ultimately, he was acquired by the Senators at the trade deadline this year because they still had a shot to make the playoffs. And Hemsky was actually great when he arrived to the Ottawa Senators. He was one of their best players after the trade deadline, and he developed chemistry with Jason Spezza. So we'll talk more about Ales Hemsky in a minute as well. But for the Ottawa Senators, yes, that situation happened with Danny Heatley. They thought they had a deal with the Edmonton Oilers. That didn't go through. Heatley didn't want to go there. Then they had another deal in place with the San Jose Sharks. They made a deal there. They got Milan Michalek in that deal. And he's been with the Ottawa Senators ever since. And that includes his new contract. He re-signed with the Ottawa Senators this offseason as an unrestricted free agent. And that's good for them because when he's on his game, he's one of their most talented players and one of their better goal scorers. Last season was a bit of a rough patch for Michalek, despite the fact that he played all 82 games. But hopefully this season will be a little bit better for him, and maybe playing with a guy like Mika Zibanejad will help him have a bounce back year. But then, of course, we fast forward now to the 2013 offseason, last offseason. They thought they had a deal done with Daniel Alfredsson that he was going to come back and finish his career with the Ottawa Senators. He ends up leaving, and goes on to sign a 1-year deal with the Detroit Red Wings. And he's an unrestricted free agent now, and it's unknown whether he's going to come back and play another year. That's all dependent on the growth of top prospect Anthony Mantha. So that's something that'll be watched over the course from now till training camp begins. And then this summer, here Ottawa had another player ask for a trade and to ask out to leave Ottawa, and that was their captain, Jason Spezza. Jason Spezza had been the cornerstone of their team for the last few years. He had been an Ottawa Senator his entire career, former second overall pick back in 2001, right behind Ilya Kovalchuk, a huge playmaking center / power forward who is excellent with the passing, had excellent hands, used his big body to get to the net. Ottawa's now going to miss that as they now lose their definitive top-line center, but a trade had to be done. He only had a year left on his contract. But he really wanted out of Ottawa, and Ottawa doesn't want to keep players who don't want to be there. So, ultimately for the Ottawa Senators, a trade would be made where Jason Spezza was dealt out of Ottawa, and ultimately he would be along with a prospect forward Ludwig Karlsson would be dealt to the Dallas Stars, and in return Ottawa acquired forward Alex Chiasson, prospect forwards Nicholas Paul and Alexander Guptill, and a second-round pick for 2015. So they lose. So Jason Spezza, a big loss for their organization. That was actually the number one trade of this off-season. That season, without a doubt, Jason Spezza was probably the highly touted second-line center addition for all the teams. I mean, the Ducks were interested in him as well, but ultimately they wanted Ryan Kessler more. They got him, and of course the St. Louis Blues signed Paul Stastny, and that allowed for the Dallas Stars to take their opportunity and get Jason Spezza. And now it's going to be a weird situation because you got to wonder now if Jason Spezza is even going to fit with the Dallas Stars, because this is a player who's used to getting all the attention, all the hype, and being the go-to guy at center. He's not going to get that same kind of attention in Dallas. He's no longer the go-to guy. Tyler Seguin is. So you got to wonder if that's something that's going to hurt the Stars in the long run. But I honestly do like the return that Ottawa's getting in this deal. I mean, Nicholas Paul's an okay prospect, but Alexander Guptill, he's going to be a good player in this league. He's a top prospect. He's one of Ottawa's top prospects overall. He was Dallas's 77th overall pick in the third round back in 2010. He's only 22 years of age. He has a shot to make the team, with not this year, but probably the following year, or even 2 years down the road. But he could end up being a really good second-line left winger in the future. He's a big 6'3", 175-pound forward, so big body. So a good prospect to get there. And then really the key piece in that trade, Alex Chiasson. Alex Chiasson, I mean, last season really broke out offensively, and he is a really gifted individual. He's got a lot of talent. Great stick handling abilities, great passing. And those hands are just absolutely incredible. And he's only 23. He'll be 24 in October. He was Dallas's 38th overall pick in the second round during 2009. When he first came up in the lockout-shortened year, he played 7 games and he had 7 points. That included 6 goals. and he was a +3. Last year, through 79 games with the Stars, 13 goals, 22 assists, and 35 points, which is a start. And he had 144 shots on goal while only getting 38 penalty minutes. But he was a -21, which tells you that he's a really good offensive player, not a good defensive player. He's not as good a defensive player as Jason Spezza, and even Jason Spezza wasn't even that good last year. He had a worse plus-minus last year than Chason. And then in the playoffs, Chason kind of struggled through 6 games. Only a goal and an assist, and he was a -7 with 7. But he did have 14 shots on goal, and he only took 1 penalty that whole series. So it tells you, I mean, he still got some work to do to refine his game. But ultimately, I think this is a good acquisition for the Ottawa Senators. Again, you can't deny it. When it comes to great hands cannot be denied, and that's exactly what Alex Chason has. He's very gifted when he has the puck. It's when he doesn't have the puck, that's going to need work with Ottawa. But ultimately, he's going to be in their top 6, and he'll be their second-line right winger, while Bobby Ryan will still be their top-line winger. And actually, that's another situation for the Ottawa Senators now. Bobby Ryan's entering his contract year because he had 2 years remaining when he was acquired from the Anaheim Ducks. And the talk now is that he wants to leave. So expect a lot. So expect the return of all the Bobby Ryan trade rumors this offseason, and expect all the talks of the Philadelphia Flyers being the team to go after Bobby Ryan during the summer. That's going to be a major topic during this offseason as far as rumors are concerned. But Jason Spezza is probably the big loss for the Ottawa Senators this year, and Alex Chason's the big gain. I mean, they also lost Ales Hemsky, their trade deadline acquisition. He was so good with the Ottawa Senators when they got him, and they wanted to give him a contract, but he did not want to return. He did not want to return. He wanted to go to a team where he had a chance to win, so he ultimately would join Jason Spezza and sign with the Dallas Stars. He signed a 3-year contract there. So that's also a really big loss for the Senators. And then they also let centerman Stefan DaCosta go. He went on to sign in the KHL. So they lose out on Stefan DaCosta. And then so those are 3 losses for the Ottawa Senators. 1 insignificant loss, and then 2 really big losses. They also have Joe Corvo, veteran defenseman, Matt Cassian, left winger, and goaltender Nathan Lawson still on the free agent board. None of those guys are going to be back with the Ottawa Senators this year. And then the other signing that the Ottawa Senators made, their sole signing, I should say, they only made, other than acquiring Alex Chason in the Jason Spezza trade, they made one other move, and that came in the form of a signing. It was their only signing this offseason, and that was the signing of 33-year-old center David Legwand, who is coming over from the Detroit Red Wings. David Legwand is a guy who spent the first 15 seasons of his career with the Nashville Predators. He had spent his whole career with Nashville up until the trade deadline. He was the former second overall pick back in the 1998 NHL entry draft. He's not 33 years of age. He's actually 34 years of age now. He just turned 34 2 days ago. But he was a Nashville Predator his whole career up until the trade deadline last year, where he was dealt to the Detroit Red Wings. And he had a great first game in a Red Wings uniform, but struggled after that. And he's a Detroit native, so not a good way for him to go out with his hometown team. Ultimately, the Ottawa Senators knew they needed another center with Jason Spezza gone and Stefan DaCosta being let go. So David Legwand was the most obvious choice. He brings wisdom and experience he'll bring a lot of wisdom and experience to the Ottawa Senators and add a lot of depth as well. Again, he's not really the player he once was. I mean, he was always an overrated player to me as it is. as it is. He really never panned out to be anything more than a second-line center anyway. But he's always been regarded as a really good defensive center. Very good when he has the puck. And a very good leader both on and off the ice as well. So don't be surprised if we see David Legwand wearing an alternate captain, being an alternate captain in Ottawa this year. But, there's a possibility he could play on the second line and be in the top six if Mika Zibanejad proves he needs more development. But the expectation is that Zibanejad is going to pan out this year and break out and start living up to his expectations this year, and that David Legwand will play center on the third line or even the fourth line. I doubt the fourth line. I see him being more of a third line kind of guy. But it's not that big of a contract either. But it's a good, again, this is a player who's going to help him out. We may see him on the power play, but he'll really help out their penalty killing. A penalty killing unit which wasn't really that great last year, 22nd in the league. Their power play wasn't even as good as maybe they thought it was going to be. It wasn't terrible. It was still in the top 15. They were 14th in the league on the power play, which isn't great, but it isn't bad either. It was an okay power play last year. I think they expected more from it. It was really the penalty kill that gave them trouble last season. So, it was really the penalty killing that gave them trouble last year. So, we'll see. We'll see how it all turns out. I think this is a good signing by the Ottawa Senators. It's just a shame that this is their only signing. It's just really kind of a shame that this is their only signing this offseason. And because of that, Ottawa is considered to be one of the worst teams, if not the worst team, of the offseason this year, because there was so much more that they probably could have done. There were no changes in the front office, no changes among the coaching staff. And hopefully, Ottawa hopes to build off this year. They hope that guys like Kyle Turris and Mika Zibanejad continue to improve so that they can improve on their record from last year. The overall record at the end of last year, 37, 31, and 14. So they did finish with a winning record. It finished over 6 games over 500. However, it was only good enough for 88 points, and only good enough for 5th in the Atlantic, and only good enough for 11th in the Eastern Conference. They did battle for a playoff spot, though. They were in that battle for a while. They only finished 5 points out, but still, not the kind of season the Ottawa Senators were expecting to have. And when you don't play well, changes are made. Players want to leave. So Ottawa's situation this offseason was a little bit different. Whereas most teams will completely let go of the players that weren't performing, Ottawa really didn't find themselves in that position. They were more in a position where the players themselves wanted to leave. Of Jason Spezza and Ales Hemsky specifically, who really rounded out their top 6. Ales Hemsky was great when he came over. But I mentioned for the Ottawa Senators, other than the addition of David Legwand, they were pretty much all quiet, and they pretty much revolved around re-signing their guys. They brought back, as I said before, they re-signed Milan Michalek to a they re-signed Milan Michalek this year. I believe it was to 4 years. They got restricted free agent defenseman Mark Borowiecki re-signed. He's a guy who could come up and be a real good defenseman for them on the bottom pair one day. And then just a couple hours ago, they signed forward Clark MacArthur to a 5-year, $23.25 million contract extension. This was Clark MacArthur's contract year, but Ottawa wanted to lock him up long term before an asking price became higher. Before an asking price came higher, they want to get Clark MacArthur locked up for a cheap price, especially if he's going to have an even better season this year. I mean, I see that as both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because now you won't have to sign him. You won't have to spend the whole season talking about a contract extension. You won't have to deal with him asking for a lot of money. And you won't come into a situation where it goes too long to the offseason and then he doesn't re-sign because he wants more money than Ottawa's willing to bargain for. However, at the same time, it's bad because now, Clark MacArthur is a player known for being an up and down kind of player. He'll have one really good season and then he'll come back down to earth the next year and have a really bad season. So I feel like Ottawa could have waited to see what kind of season he was going to have this year and then maybe talked about a contract. But, I mean, I see the motivation behind everything. I kind of see why they didn't wait. So it's kind of a double-edged sword here with this signing because, again, they're getting him at a cheap price. So I like Clark MacArthur. I think he fits the team well. But now we know he's going to be an Ottawa Senator for a long time, assuming he does play well and doesn't get bought out. Hopefully that does happen because I like the Ottawa Senators. It would be really interesting to see them have a bounce back year this year. I really want them to have a bounce back year this year. I think they have the potential to do it, but it's going to be a long season in the sense that they're going to probably now have to deal with Bobby Ryan maybe asking out to be traded, and then ultimately he doesn't come back to the team when he becomes a free agent. I'm sure the Philadelphia Flyers are going to be calling at the Senators' door for most of the season asking about Bobby Ryan. There's going to be a lot of conversation in that regard. So we'll see what happens this year. I mean, Ottawa, though, the big thing is that they need to be better defensively, and that's really, I think, where the big problems lie. I feel like they could have spent this offseason building up their defense, getting better defensively, and, just ridding themselves of that problem of constantly turning over the puck. Because, like I said, they were such a great team last year, and Erik Karlsson was such a great offensive player last year. Defensively, though, they turned over the puck a lot. Karlsson was not a good defensive defenseman last year. Every time he turned over the puck, it led to a scoring opportunity. Same with Jason Spezza. Same with pretty much all the players, except for maybe like Kyle Turris. That was a big problem. So hopefully that'll be corrected this year, and that's something they're going to work on in training camp. They're going to work on their defensive. I hope for this offseason, they're already a good enough offensive team. Even without Jason Spezza, they now just need to get better defensively this offseason, and that'll be something that they're going to work on all offseason long, all training camp long, or at least that's what I'm expecting head coach Paul McLean to do in his training camps this year. As we now go ahead and take a look at some of the big questions for the Ottawa Senators. And probably the biggest question of all, who will be the Senators' new captain? Well, one's got to think that the two most likely possibilities will be both come on the blue line. One, it will be either defenseman Chris Phillips, because he's a veteran, he's been in this league a long time, former first overall pick. He's 36 years of age, so he brings a lot of experience to the team. So he's a possibility to be the captain. But you also got Erik Karlsson, who's pretty much who is the future of their blue line. And in today's game, you need youth. I think youth becomes a lot more important, even in the leadership roles. He's 24 years of age, and he is quite arguably their best player. He really is. He's their best offensive player, even though he's a blue liner, and he's just a stud. Offensively, he is a stud. So, whether that can translate to a leadership role remains to be seen. So we'll see. Will Curtis Lazar begin the season in Ottawa? He was the 17th overall pick in the 2013 NHL draft, and he's 19 years of age. So there's a lot of opportunity for him to make it. But if he doesn't make the team, which I'll be honest, I don't expect him to this year. I personally think he'll need another season to grow. Then he goes back to play one more season for the Edmonton Oil Kings of the Western Hockey League, and then earn a spot for Team Canada at the 2015 World Junior Championships. Where is Mika Zibanejad going to play? Well, that's really all up to him. I mean, one's going to anticipate that Kyle Turris is going to be now the new number one center in place of Jason Spezza. He's finally growing. He's finally becoming the player that everyone believed that he had the potential to become, and he's now. And it only took him until he was 24 years of age to do so. He's now 25. Last year he really broke out, and he finally lived up to the expectations thrown upon him when he was selected third overall by the Phoenix/Arizona Coyotes of the 2007 NHL draft. He did not turn out to be what the Coyotes had hoped. They traded him to the Senators, and for 2 seasons in a row, he put up 12 goals and 17 assists for 29 points. He really helped him out defensively when he came over in 2012. He was making a name for himself as a good defensive player, and then last season, despite how miserable of a year it was for Ottawa, Kyle Turris was pretty much the ultimate upside for them because his offensive game finally took shape as well, and now he's developed into one heck of a two-way player. So, we'll see. I mean, Mika Zibanejad, though, this is a kid who's on the rise, and he's got a lot of high expectations to be a superstar in this league, and he could be better than Kyle Turris in the long run, and if that's the case, he could push to play on that top line spot as well, but ultimately, the second line is probably going to be his most likely destination. There is a possibility he doesn't play well, and David Legwand or Zach Smith play very well, and he goes to the third line. I don't see him going any lower than that, but you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen. But last year, through 69 games played, he really broke out with 16 goals, 17 assists, and 33 points. And only 18 penalty minutes, and he had 153 shots on goal. The only downside is that he was a minus 15. So this is a player who needs a lot of work defensively, but there's no denying his offensive talent. That's for sure. Who is Ottawa's starting goaltender this season? That is a real big question, because Craig Anderson has been pretty much their workhorse since the day he arrived, and he's brought some career years to the Ottawa Senators franchise over the last couple of seasons. He was a big part of their team, and whenever he's healthy, he's good. He provides solid goaltending. But the thing is, Craig Anderson is not always healthy. Last season he was healthy, but he didn't get a lot of help up front. He only finished 25-16-8 last year, but he had a 3.00 goals against average and a 9.11 save percentage. So the save percentage was okay, but the goals against was not very good. Ottawa, that was another thing about the Ottawa Senators. They were among the teams that gave up the most shots in the National Hockey League. So Craig Anderson and even Robin Lehner could only do so much. And Robin Lehner is Robin Lehner is a kid on the rise. Their second round, 46th overall pick from the 2009 NHL draft. He's only 23, and the time could officially be here for Leonard to become their starting goaltender. He was just signed. He was another guy who was signed to a contract extension this offseason. He was signed to a contract extension. Last year, he played 36 games and finished 12, 15, and 6 with a .913 save percentage, which was a higher save percentage than Craig Anderson, but a lower goals against than Craig Anderson, a .306 goals against. And I mean, where he really shined though came at the end of the season when he won 4 straight games to end the year. That was pretty much the highlight point of Robin Lehner's season. But overall, he finished under 500 by 3 games. But one could argue that he really didn't have a lot of support in a lot of these games. He didn't have a lot of support in a lot of these games because, again, Ottawa, as a defensive team, not very good. And Ottawa surrendered a lot of shots when he was in net. I mean, even when Craig Anderson was in net, they surrendered a lot of shots. But Robin Lehner was no exception to the rule either. But again, it was that ending point of the season where he finally broke out and got everyone thinking, hey, this guy does have the potential to be our number one after all. 5-0-1 in his final 6 starts. So, rather impressive in his final 6 games, giving up no more than 3 goals. And in a lot of those games, and in half of those games, he saw 40 or more shots. So, give a lot of credit to Robin Lehner for his strong finish. But he has the making to be their starting goaltender this year. I mean, I think Craig Anderson will be the starting goalie at least to begin the season because he's been their starter for so long. But again, he is 33 years of age, so he's not getting any younger. This is pretty much his last prime year. His prime years are coming to an end. You gotta think that this will probably be the last year in his prime. I'm pretty sure his contract runs out real soon, and if not, then he's someone who they're probably going to trade. But for Craig Anderson, again, I think he'll begin the year as a starter, and depending on how things go, really will depend on if he keeps that spot or if Robin Lehner is going to take the starting position. We'll see, because Craig Anderson does come up big in big situations. But we'll see. Lehner is a kid on the rise, and he could be the starter sooner rather than later. And then, will the Senators be more successful at home in 2014-2015? Last season, most of the team's success last year came on the road. They were a much better road team last year. Ottawa did finish the season strong, and they did finish with a winning record at home, 18-17-6 at home, but at the same time, only 3 teams in the Eastern Conference had fewer victories on home ice. So, Ottawa's got to be a better home team, because on the road, in comparison, they were 19-14-8, which was 4 games over 500 rather than 1. So, they got a lot more points on the road. They got a lot more points on the road. So, they were a really good road team. I'm not going to say they were a dominant road team, but they were a really good road team. And not so great of a home team. One of the worst home teams in the Eastern Conference, despite being 1 game over 500. So their home play definitely has to improve this offseason. And probably one of the biggest questions I personally have for the Ottawa Senators. Really, we talked about one of the big questions I have is how are they going to work? What kind of what kind of conditioning is the team going to have in training camp this year? How are they going to improve their play in their own end? That is a big question because, as I said earlier, they didn't bring in anybody who could help them in that category, which you gotta think is something that they should have done this offseason. Maybe bring in a good puck handling defenseman who plays well in his own end and skates well. A shot blocking defenseman, but can skate and handle the puck like an offensive player. That's something I think this team is missing. I think they're missing that shutdown defenseman who plays like an offensive defenseman. Those are players you love to have. And who knows? Maybe someone in their system comes up and becomes that guy. There's a lot of defensemen coming up who are expected to battle for spots. But, again, you really got to feel that the Ottawa Senators are missing something, particularly on their blue line, and maybe even on their bottom six. Maybe a depth player who could handle the puck really well. A depth player who can handle the puck really well and play well on his own end and help out the penalty killing. Maybe a guy like a Ryan Carter type of player, why haven't, I think this is a team that could be in the running to go after a guy like Ryan Carter. I think he would fit their system really, really well. The Devils have not signed him yet. And at this point, you got to wonder if the Devils will even sign him at all. And he's a really underrated, to me, is a very underrated player in this league for what he does. As shown with the New Jersey Devils, he really developed his career out there with the Devils. And he's become a really reliable fourth-line player. So you got to wonder, what's going to happen to Ryan Carter, And should the Ottawa Senators go get him? That would make the most sense in the world. But we'll see. Hopefully, things work out for the Ottawa Senators as we now take a look at what the lineup could look like for this coming season. There's no denying what the top line is going to be. The top line for this year's edition of the Ottawa Senators is going to be the line that was actually considered the second line last year, but will now get promoted to top line duty because of the losses of Jason Spezza and Ales Hemsky, and the supposed decline of Milan Michalek, even though he did resign. But Kyle Turris is expected to be the undisputed number one center. He's expected to only get better from here. He's expected to center Bobby Ryan on the right side and Clark MacArthur on the left side. And as I said before, Clark MacArthur, in his contract year, will now re-sign with the Ottawa Senators to a 5-year contract extension worth $23.25 million. That came a few hours ago. So they got him locked up long term. That's a good top line. They worked really well together last year. They were their best line, and actually, really, they were one of the most underrated lines in the National Hockey League last year. Some people may tell you that they may have been the best second line in the NHL last year, despite the fact that they weren't a playoff team. But now they all got promoted to top line duty, and they're all expected to continue to work great magic together. We'll see, though. It's going to be a really interesting season for the Ottawa Senators. The second line, Mika Zibanejad, is expected to be ready to take the next step and be the second line center with Alex Chiasson, their trade acquisition in the key return in the Jason Spezza trade on the right side, and the newly re-signed Milan Michalek on the left. So that's expected to be the second line. We'll see if that line will hold up, because I have no doubt in Alex Chiasson's ability to improve, just because of those great hands and be a solid 25-30 goal scorer for them. 25-30 goal scorer, maybe 55-65 point scorer. And Milan Michalek, we all know what he can do when he's playing at his best. And that's when he's playing like he's healthy. Last year, even though he played a full season, he just did not look like a healthy player last year. He looked like there was something wrong with him. So hopefully he can get back to the way he was and be an effective player for them last year. Because if you do that, if Milan Michalek gets back to the way he was, and Mika Zibanejad and Kyle Turris continue their development, and Clark MacArthur has a good year, and Bobby Ryan has a better year than last year, because even though he was great at the beginning, he really struggled down the stretch, and I believe he even missed the remainder of the season last year with an injury. He did get injured last year. Yes, he suffered a season-ending injury last year, and he's 27 years of age now, so he's officially in his prime. So hopefully he can be better, and of all these guys in the top six, I think Alex Chiasson, to me, is the most likely to improve. But if all these guys can improve, I think we're actually looking at one of the better top sixes in the National Hockey League this year, even without Jason Spezza or Ales Hemsky. I think Ottawa's being over-criticized for those losses. That's just my opinion. I think they still have a good forward core. And even with their third line, this is kind of where I want to touch upon. The line of Zach Smith centering Chris Neal on the right and Colin Greening on the left is expected to be the third line, and then the line of David Legwand centering Mark Stone on the right side and Mike Hoffman on the left side is expected to be the fourth line. I don't know if I agree with that. I think David Legwand's line should probably be the third line. And actually, I think Colin Greening is a good player for the third line. I think that's really where he belongs. He's a great skater, got great speed. So he generates a lot, even though he may not put up the best offensive numbers. But I think it would make sense for a guy like Legwand and Stone to play on the third line with Colin Greening, and then Zach Smith and Chris Neal go on the fourth line with Mike Hoffman. So we'll see, though. We will see. I think it'll be interesting because David Legwand's more than a fourth line center. Zach Smith, I don't know. I don't know what to really think about Zach Smith. He's really a fourth-line guy when you look at it. He's only 26, so he has another year to grow. And last year, I just feel like Zach Smith hasn't really been what the Ottawa Senators maybe thought he was going to be, and maybe they were expecting him to be an offensive force, but he's been really just an enforcer out there, which there's nothing wrong with that. He's a really good depth player, but I feel like he belongs on the fourth line, and so does Chris Neal. They're fourth-line players. Chris Neal, he's 35 years of age, so he's not getting any younger, nor is he getting any better, He is what he is. He is what he is. So I think that's kind of a mess right there. I think that needs to be switched around. Because Mark Stone, he's a kid that's up and coming. He's ready to play in the league. And he is actually probably going to eventually be a top six forward. So so that's going to be another big thing for the Senators this year. If this is indeed Bobby Ryan's last season with the Ottawa Senators, which I think it will be, I think the Philadelphia Flyers have been calling his name for far too long, and he's always wanted to play there. It's been his dream to represent the team he grew up watching as a child. So I think with that being kept in knowledge, I think a guy like Mark Stone is going to be prepared to take Bobby Ryan's place in that top six. Because Mark Stone is going to be a top six forward in this league. He is going to be a scorer. Even though he was a 6th-round pick, he's going to be one of the big steals of that 2010 draft. He's only 22, and he's only getting better. So I think this is going to be a big year for Mark Stone. He's going to be a player to watch. Mike Hoffman as well. He'll develop into a real good third liner. And maybe even if he really performs well, maybe on the second line, if a guy like Milan Michalek just continues to decline. We'll see though. I think though the third and fourth lines need to be switched around. I think the line combinations are fine. It's just the Zach Smith line should really be the fourth line, and the David Legwand line should really be the third line. And then of course you got Eric Condra as the 13th forward, and Derek Grant will probably come up and be the 14th guy. That's at least that is at least what the expectations are. Eric Condra, I mean, he's a roster player. So expect him to constantly switch in and out of the lineup this year. Maybe with, Mark Stone, if Stone doesn't play well. We'll see. But ultimately, I think the Senators have a good situation up front. They have a really good offense this year. Even without Jason Spezza and Alex Hemsky, this is still a really formidable offense. And you have some of these players that are only getting on the rise. Ottawa's going to be a playoff team again, not too long from now. The future of this team isn't that far away. They're going to be a real good team in the future, and they're going to be a playoff team in the future. There's no doubt about it. Whether that's going to happen today or not remains to be seen. As we now take a look at their defense. Now, to me, I think this is a good-looking defense on paper, but when you really look at it deeper, you end up realizing that a lot of these players on this blue line are still really young, and this blue line is actually probably the weakness of the Ottawa Senators when you really look at it. I mean, as far as the future is concerned, this is going to be a great blue line one day, as far as the future is concerned. Long beyond after Chris Phillips' time in the league is up. But as far as the here and the now, I think it still needs a lot of work. I mean, there's no denying the top pair of Mark Mathot and Erik Karlsson. Karlsson, of course, brings the offensive flux on that D pairing, and Mark Mathot is the shutdown guy. He's the physical presence. They worked well together last year, and they're expected to work real good together again this year, shutting down the opposition's top players. But now I mean that's at least expected to be a good pairing. I mean, last year I think Erik Karlsson spent most of his time with Jared Cowan, and that could be the case again. This season, I think, depending on how you look at it, I think it's all going to come down to training camp. But I think at least to begin the year, Mark Mathot would make the most sense to play with Erik Karlsson, and then if that doesn't work, then maybe Jared Cowan will take his place. But right now, big Jared Cowan is expected to play with the young up-and-coming Cody Ceci. Cody Ceci is another kid. He is going to be one heck of an offensive defenseman in this league one day. But you now put him and Erik Karlsson together on a 1-2 punch. Karlsson playing the top pair and Ceci on the second pair. You're looking at maybe the best 1-2 punch as far as offensive defensemen are concerned in the league. I mean, that's all going to depend on if Cody Ceci can continue to grow and if he can develop into the offensive defenseman that everyone believes he has the potential to grow into. I mean, he's a big body, 6'3", 209 pounds. He's a right-handed shot. He's a power play quarterback, an Ottawa native, played for the Ottawa 67s in the Ontario Hockey League for most of his career before joining the Owen Sound attack at the end of his tenure in the OHL, and of course making the playoffs with them. But the Ottawa Senators have been in his veins throughout his whole lifetime. City, just everything pointed to the Ottawa Senators taking him with the 15th overall pick in the 2012 NHL draft. He's only 20. He'll be 21 on December 21st, just before Christmas. So, we'll see. I think that's a really good 1-2 punch to have. And then Mark Mathot and Jared Cowan. Jared Cowan is another interesting player. Their former 9th overall pick from 2009. More of a shutdown type defenseman, but has worked a lot on his offensive abilities. He's got the potential to be a good offensive defenseman as well. He's a big 6'5", 228-pound defenseman, big frame. You know, he's a left-handed shot, but he has a big cannon from the point. Whenever you have a big body, you're going to possess a cannon from the point, and Jared Cowan is no different. And then on the third pairing, you got the veteran Chris Phillips and Patrick Wierkosh. He's another big guy, 6'5", 206 pounds, a left-handed shot. He'll be 24 before training camp begins, and he really came up last year and really broke out. He has the potential to be a good two-way defenseman, for them. But he's playing the offside with Chris Phillips playing the natural left side. So we'll see how that continues about as time continues. Again, Chris Phillips doesn't have much longer in this league, so we'll see how that goes. Because then you got Eric Gryba as the 7th guy, and Eric Gryba, he's been playing in the lineup. Last year he played, and he was good last year. He was a plus player for them last year, and is more of a shutdown defenseman. Whereas Wierkosh, I guess, would be really considered more of an offensive defenseman when it really comes down to it. So it's going to be. I mean, there's no way Phillips is going to be cut out of the lineup at any point in the season, but if at some point he gets traded, maybe, you're looking at a real good third pairing now. We promote Eric Gryba to play more games, and you put him with Patrick Wierkosh. Then you have a really good third pair right there with one righty and one lefty. That's really the interesting thing there. So, ultimately, I think the defense is really the weakness for this team. I think their offense is... I think they're set on offense even without Spezza and Hemsky. The defense needs work. And then, of course, in goal, Craig Anderson is projected to be the starter, at least to begin the year, with Robin Leonard as the backup. But that could very easily change. They don't know who their starting goalie is going to be, but for Ottawa's particular situation, it's a good situation for them to be in because they have two really good goaltenders who have the potential to be who are both really number ones. Craig Anderson's a proven number one, and Robin Leonard is a number one on the rise. So, I think their goaltending. Their goaltending was really their strongest part of their team last year. Their goaltending was really the whole reason why they didn't finish worse than maybe they should have, because they faced so many shots last year, and they let in so many goals because of how poorly the defense was doing. So, you can't really blame that on the goaltending. That's really all on the part of the defense. So, we'll see. It's going to be interesting. And then you got guys like Curtis Lazar and Alexander Guptill who could battle for spots up front. Mark Morowiecki, who again was just re-signed, and Alex Grant could battle for spots on defense. And then they have Andrew Hammond as the third goalie, and he'll be the starter for the Binghamton Senators ultimately, if anything. He's the starter for the Binghamton Senators for the upcoming year. But he'll be the first goalie called up if somebody does get injured. As we now go ahead and take a look at the Ottawa Senators' top 10 prospects. This, to me, is a very good prospect pool after really looking at it and examining it. They have Curtis Lazar, their 17th overall pick from 2013, is their bona fide number one prospect, and for good reason. He can play both center and right wing, though many people will tell you he's much more dominant on the wing. Last year, through 58 games played, 41 goals, 35 assists, and 76 points for the Memorial Cup winning Edmonton Oil Kings of the Western Hockey League. He was one of their alternate captains, and he was just so good for them. He had 10 goals and 22 points and a plus 12 rating in 21 playoff games as well, and then 2 goals and 4 points in 5 Memorial Cup games. So he was just so good all around. As a prospect last year, he's a really hard worker, and he's projected to play this year, but it won't surprise anyone if he plays one more year down in Edmonton and before turning pro as well. So for this player, he'll come to training camp and battle for a spot, but it could also go either way. We'll see. And then, of course, they got Mark Stone, who's definitely ready to play full-time this year. There's no doubt about that. He's not going back to juniors. He's not going back to the American Hockey League. He's going to be on the team this year. He's now an official roster player. He's their number 2 prospect. And then you continue down the list. Matt Pempel, their former 24th overall pick from 2011. He's number 3. Michael Wickstrand is number 4. He's a kid I've heard a lot about. Alexander Guptill is number 5. Shane Prince, number 6. He's another guy who could play center or wing, but he's more of a left winger than a right winger. Center or left wing. Frederick Cleason's number 7. He's a guy I've seen play. He's supposed to be really good. Buddy Robinson, number 8. Marcus Hogberg, number 9. And Ryan Zingle, another left wing / center, at number 10. So they have a bunch of prospects here who could play both wing and center, whether it's left wing or right wing. And this is a good prospect pool. I mean, Ryan Zingle, this is a real interesting kid. He could prove to be the steal of the 2011 draft. I mean, just based off the way he performs in college, and in the 9-game stint he got with the Binghamton Senators. So if a guy like that is number 10, that tells you that this prospect pool is really good. And it's not as good as the Buffalo Sabres, but it's definitely better. But it is definitely better than that of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it is pretty much in competition with that of the Florida Panthers as well. I'd say Florida's maybe is a little bit better, but Ottawa is in that top group. I think they're going to be one of the top teams in the Atlantic Division as far as their top 10 prospect pool is concerned. And again, Curtis Lazar, there's no denying that he's the number 1 guy. However, the prospect that I've always been interested in the most, really, of all these guys for the Ottawa Senators, I were to really examine it, I'd say the prospect that I consider one of their better prospects, if not their best prospect, believe it or not, is going to be their number 10 prospect, left winger / centerman, Ryan Zingle. Ryan Zingle, or DeZingle, again, he was the 7th round pick number 204th overall of the 2011 NHL draft. And last season, for Ohio State of the Big Ten Division, he did nothing but impress, and impress some more. Through 37 games played, 22 goals, 24 assists, 46 points. He's 6 foot, 188 pounds, native of Wheaton, Illinois, and he signed an entry-level contract with the Sens in April after completing his 3rd season at Ohio State. I mean, he was an alternate captain for the Buckeyes, and he was one of the 10 finalists for the 2014 Hobey Baker Memorial Award, becoming the 4th player from Ohio State to be recognized for the award. He was a first-team All-Big Ten honoree, and he led conference players in scoring while tying for the team-leading goals in 2013-14. And last year, because of how good he played for Ohio State. He was rewarded with a 9-game stint for the Binghamton Senators of the American Hockey League at the end of the year, and he really impressed with 2 goals, 5 assists, and 7 points in 9 games. Which tells you this is a player who has the potential to be a top 6 player one day and a steal out of that 7th round. I mean, a 7th round pick who can perform like that cannot go unnoticed. And Ryan Zingle is no exception. This guy has the makings to be a good player one day. I think he's going to officially turn pro this season. It may take him a couple of years. He may need some work. He may need some time to develop in the American Hockey League for a couple of seasons. And he's 22 years of age, so he probably wouldn't come up until he's about 23 or 24. But you never know. I think we'll see him in training camp. We'll see him in a preseason game or 2. But he's probably not going to make the team. But this is a guy who's got the potential to be a real good player one day. A real good player. So that is my top prospect for the Ottawa Senators for what is considered to be a really good group. Now, the player on the Ottawa Senators this year that I think needs to be better in order for them to have a chance at returning to the playoffs. This is actually a really tough decision. It's not like the Toronto Maple Leafs where it was obvious that David Clarkson was the guy. For a team like this, and for given the situation, it's really hard to say. But if I were to really think hard about it and choose, I'd say that the player who needs to be better for them this year, in order for them to have a shot at getting back to the playoffs, has to probably be Milan Michalek. And why I say Milan Michalek? Well, he's still relatively young. He's 29 years of age. He'll be 30 on December 7th. So he's still relatively young. And last year, he played all 82 games for the first time in his career. The first time in his career he played a full 82-game season. And what did he do? And what did he do? Well, he did nothing but look like a player who was playing on one leg. 17 goals, 22 assists, 39 points. Numbers that really do not show his true potential. He was a minus 25, one of the worst plus-minus players in the league, when he's typically a rather solid defensive player. Those are not good statistics. And he did have 41 penalty minutes, which is not a lot, but it's still enough for a team that was among the most penalized teams in the league. I mean, he did generate 169 shots on goal, which is good news. So it's not like he wasn't trying out there. But for a guy like Milan Michalek with the kind of potential that he has, and now considering that despite how bad he was last season, the fact that Ottawa took the time to re-sign him, you gotta be better if you want to stay. So yes, I think Milan Michalek, this is a guy with a lot of offensive potential, and he needs to show it. He needs to get back to the offensive level that he showed during the 2011-2012 campaign, which was arguably his career year. You really think about it now. You really think about it now. With Milan Michalek, he's the guy who really needs to be better. If he can be better, then the Ottawa Senators will have a good top 6, and they'll have a shot at getting back to the playoffs. So Milan Michalek is the player that needs to be better for them this year. Overall, are the Ottawa Senators a playoff team? I think they are, even without Jason Spezza and Alex Hemsky, I think they're a good team, and I think they're going to finish over 500. I think the development of both Kyle Turris and Mika Zibanejad is going to take them to new heights, and they'll put themselves back in that bubble mix as well. But I'm not convinced at the same time. I'm not convinced entirely that they're going to be ready to get back to the playoffs, just for the fact that they didn't do enough this offseason to help improve their team. This was a team that needed to be active this offseason. They needed to do something else. You feel like they needed to do something else. At the very least, go out and get one defenseman who could help with the puck possession game and a bottom six forward that could help out their penalty killing. But so yeah, a shutdown defenseman who moves the puck well, skates well, and can block shots and play the penalty kill and help in the puck possession department, and a bottom six forward, maybe even a fourth line forward who can help out the penalty killing. Those are two things Ottawa needed to do, and it's not entirely out of the question for them to make another move or two. I mean, there's still players out there, and again, I stressed Ryan Carter out there. I hope Ottawa's watching this, because I think that would be a great addition for the Ottawa Senators to make, and that would be a real good player for them to go after. That would help out their penalty killing a lot, which was 22nd in the league last year. That's something that needs to be better. But again, like I said, I like the direction that they're going, and I like the way they're handling the situation with their longtime top scoring center Jason Spezza leaving, and I like the way they're handling the Ales Hemsky situation as well. And I also like the way they're handling the Bobby Ryan rumors coming back up, and maybe taking in the fact that Bobby Ryan probably will not be back. They're going to try to negotiate a contract extension with him, but ultimately I think that will fail and that he will leave when the season comes to an end. But I like the progression of their forwards, and I like the progression of their offensive defensemen, and even a guy like Jared Cowan on the defensive end. And their goaltending is really good. It's a good tandem, one of the better tandems in the league among the non-playoff teams, and it's a good situation for them to be in. A really good situation for them to be in. I think Robin Leonard is a guy who could definitely be ready to take the next step forward, especially if Craig Anderson is on the decline. But like I said, they didn't do enough this offseason to really make themselves a better team. I mean, yes, the David Legwand signing is nice and all, but they needed to do better than that. They needed to bring in a bottom six guy who could help out their penalty killing. So, in result of the fact that they didn't do enough, and because of growing pains, the fact that they are still growing, I don't think even though I do think they'll finish with a winning record, and maybe even a better record than last year potentially, no, the Ottawa Senators are not a playoff team this year. And that'll do it for episode 151 of Hockey on the Spot. Be sure to join me again tomorrow when we talk about the Detroit Red Wings. So until then, this has been Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all again tomorrow. Thank you, and have a great day.